So we're back to the Eightfold Path, and the topic we're taking up this week is about samadhi, commonly translated right samadhi, but we like appropriate, skillful, and the subtitle is "What are we cultivating?" Question mark.
Mm. And I like that we took a break before we came back to tracking our eightfold path, that often in samadhi, there's rest periods. You don't have to always do one thing, because the the phrase right samadhi, it can sound like we're being asked to concentrate. But when we look at it more closely, it's a much richer and subtle complex of meanings, rather than just a focus on one thing. Do you want
And
me to go into that, or
I
yeah?
could I could, I could
Okay,
go from
sure.
there. So it doesn't, easily translate that Pali word samadhi doesn't easily or neatly translate, maybe neatly is better, into English. It's got a lot of different kinds of translations. The most common one is concentration, though I think that that's problematic in many ways. And I tend to prefer ones that I prefer collectedness, or another word, it's a unification. Mind becomes more unified. Um, Integration. What other words do you like, Linda?
Settledness, and even integration. We've heard it talked about that way. And the interesting point, Nelly, as you're bringing out those words, is that not one angle really captures it. It's kind of, we have to look at the conditions which samadhi arises in for to see really the way it can be used more accurately.
Right. And so really we need at times many of these words to
Yeah.
describe describe it. Oh, and yeah, and I sometimes or most commonly call it inwardly collected. I said
Mhm.
collectedness, but it's a kind of inward collected, which is kind of when you think of it in the most direct meaning of the word, like what are we collecting? But at any rate, it's not like coin collection or stamp collection, but there is a feeling quality to that, which things don't feel so scattered and got such loose ends. And yeah.
Right. And really that goes to the roots of the Pali word. Um, you when you break it down to sam, and di or da, we get this kind of understanding even from the Pali language. It's to bring things together, to collect them. And I think of outside coin collections or whatever you
All
collect.
right.
There's a way you bring that together and you have it all in one place.
Well, that's true. It's true. And you organize it, although we don't necessarily organize it in that way in samadhi, but yeah, it doesn't feel so
So
scattered. Yeah.
scattered and all over the place.
Right.
It can really be paid attention to as more of as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and the word, the reason why I really don't like the translation concentration, well, partly it evokes school stuff, like you must concentrate on this, whatever you're learning. And it can feel like a kind of effort, and it can feel tight, and it can feel forceful. Um, but that I don't think is what samadhi is. Samadhi is more settling than forcing. Uh,
Right. More settling than forcing, and maybe even you know, a kind of we're learning how to gather the mind. You know,
mhm.
it's a trial and error process, and that the way we would like to teach it is that that's as important as what we're gathering. The gathering samadhi is how you gather it is also equally important.
And then also what at least I value is knowing when oh, something's shifted. I feel different, and things feel more, well, gathered, to just use the word. But they don't, yeah, like I can feel discrete moments when that happens.
Right. Right.
Not necessarily because I'm doing something um to make
Yep.
it happen. I don't lean that direction.
Right, but that's the kind of sati that joins this, the awareness that something
Right,
has changed, right,
right.
distinctly. So they're not always separate, these
No,
eightfold path factors.
rarely
Rarely.
separate. We're just separating them out so we can understand them better.
Right,
And I
right.
think that's what, traditional teachings do, separate them out so you can, like, well, focus in on one of them. We're back to
Yeah,
that focusing,
yeah,
right? It
yeah.
this now becomes the object. Samadhi is the object of our talks today and this week. Um, but it's not all there is.
Right, right. Right. I mean, and we're focusing in on it so that we can actually discern some of the different ways to cultivate samadhi. There's not just one way to do that. And there's a more traditional way where you basically focus on one object. And when your mind veers off from that object, you come back to it. And you get the kind of practice of staying on something, going away, staying on something, going away. And it's often on a single object, the breath, the body, metta practice. And we do it a little different in reflective meditation. So that's what we wanted to talk about.
Right. And by doing it a little different, we end up collect cultivating, excuse me,
Yeah,
different kinds of, they're different. What develops by doing it differently is a different kind of samadhi. So when, as you were saying, in more traditional forms, we're cultivating the stability of attention, like the ability to stay again with an object, and the ability to notice, again, sati, to notice when the mind veers away from that and object, whatever the object you're choosing or it's been given to you, and then returning it. And so the kind of samadhi or collectedness is centered on that object, that single object.
right, right. Where we're looking at a moving mind. We pay attention to what goes on in a meditation, and then we reflect upon it afterwards, and then we journal, and then we reconstruct what happened. And it's a different kind of, it requires a different kind of samadhi to pay attention to that, even a different kind of effort. And that's why I would use the word tracking. It requires us to remember something and retrace, retrack our steps, see patterns. It's
Mhm.
more continuity of awareness that we're following rather than discrete objects.
And it's complicated because we're not just tracking thoughts. That's a misconception people often have when they're come to reflective meditation. But we are tracking thoughts, we're tracking emotions, we're tracking moods, we're tracking bodily states, we're tracking a complex configurations and that's shifting and changing. So it is more complicated.
Right, right. I mean, it feels more complicated when we hear each other talk about our experience. It's kind of like, oh, what do we focus on? Even when you're listening to somebody else, oh, what's important here? Where is the Dharma in this flow? It takes a lot of training to find that within ourselves, to hear it with others. Um, it takes a lot of actual concentration, gathering, collecting.
Mhm. It does. It really does. Um, so a mind or a body mind, I like that better, that can remember a meditation, that can reconstruct it in the journaling time, then can speak about it in the sharing time or at some other time. That's not an unfocused mind. That's actually a mind that is collected, but in a really different way, in a broader way, and in a more continuous way.
Okay.
So we'll
Thank
end
you. We'll end
there,
here. Yeah.
and
You
I
are
I
on
will ring a
Venmo.
bell.